Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle. I've got an exciting album spotlight show to do today. This is actually going to be a new music shuffle feature where I talk about several new albums that have come out that I'm going to do kind of a quicker shot review of these. These are albums that I've been enjoying, but I just either don't have as much to say about them for a full length, or I just wanted to mention them and there just wasn't enough time in my schedule to be able to do a full-on review of these. So I'm going to try to go through them fairly quickly, just give my general impressions of the albums, and hopefully you'll go out and check them out on your own. So the first in this set of three that I'm doing for today's New Music Shuffle is Scale the Summit and their new album Subjects. Now, this has been out for a little while now, probably about a month or so, and I was pretty excited about the prospect of this album coming out because I remember seeing Scale the Summit live for a Progressive Nation tour that was done with Dream Theater. They were one of the opening acts, and I saw this band with my dad was present as well, and I just always thought they were talented even from way back then. That was from kind of their earlier days, and they're an instrumental progressive metal act that has made several albums throughout the years since then. They have gone through a lot of different changes. It seems like the main person now who's leading the group is guitarist Chris Letchford, and so his guitar sound is all over this record. It's very present. It's kind of almost feels like a guitar solo album in some aspects. So that's really kind of the main feature here, but it's progressive metal, I remember it being called adventure metal at the time, because it's not really the crazy heavy riffs that you might associate with progressive metal, at least not all the time. There's a lot of more fluid guitar lines, and it takes you on these kind of journeys throughout the music. And I've always been a little bit conflicted about their music, because I've mentioned before in this channel that I'm not super into instrumental music usually. I like certain bands, but it's just listening throughout a whole album of it can get a little bit daunting for me. There's just not enough variety oftentimes. There's not these vocal hooks that grab me. You know, sometimes of course there's musical hooks and repeating themes and so forth, but it gets a little bit samey to me to hear these similar instrumental arrangements that a lot of these instrumental bands tend to do. So I felt that way a lot with Scale the Summit, but what's interesting is on this album they decided to feature guest vocalists. Each track has a different guest vocalist who's adding another element to the sound. So I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. This will give it an extra element that might put it on another level for me. And so I was really excited to give this a listen. So excited, in fact, that I do have the vinyl here of this album, Scale the Summit. I'm going to show this off, or already have showed this off, depending on release schedules, on a vinyl haul video, so I'll get more in depth into the inner workings of this then. But I was really excited for this to come out and really hopeful, and I will say it by and large I think is a success. It's an interesting experiment for the band to include vocalists, but it's not really as revolutionary as I thought it might be. It's pretty much still in their same wheelhouse, still in the same lane of the usual sound that you hear from them, but just with a little bit of a difference through having these vocalists throughout the tracks. So it's a really interesting idea, and I think it brings a little bit of that variety that I'm looking for, but it still has that kind of sameness throughout each track that sometimes can wear on my ear a little. But it's a fairly short album, about 40 minutes long, and so it doesn't really overstay its welcome too much, and there's enough variation from track to track. Some tracks are a little bit heavier, like the opening track Form and Finite, with kind of that heavier opening, and Daggers and Cloak is a little bit on the heavier end, featuring Ross Jennings of Haken on vocals. But there's also more laid back tracks that kind of lean more into that more flowing guitar lines that they tend to be known for, more adventurous and more, exploring different avenues, like Don't Mind Me kind of did this. I like the Space Cadet, which was kind of the closing track, kind of had this feel to it, more of that laid back, fluid feel. And so there's a lot of variety on display in that sense, but I feel like it's still, you still get that same configuration that you're used to with them and the same style. So, it's a little bit different, but also kind of along the similar lines of what they've been doing. So, but I like a lot of the vocal features. Most of these vocalists I'm unfamiliar with, but I really love and appreciate Ross Jennings of Haken and his feature. I like the inclusion of Joseph from Reign of Kendo on vocals. I think it's a highlight when he's on Jackhammer Ballet about halfway through the record. It introduces this kind of jazziness to the sound that adds a little bit variety, I think because of the style of his voice. And there's also at the end this like little flute part that I thought was interesting and wish they did more of some stuff like that in their music as well. So a lot of cool stuff on display. I recommend it for those who like this kind of instrumental metal stuff that's here. But, it's more in line with their other releases. And I wish a little bit that it was a little bit more varied. And that, sometimes it feels like the vocals are almost an afterthought. That the music itself was constructed first. It was almost an instrumental album at its core. But then they added on top of it these different singers. And sometimes it doesn't jive completely for me. The vocal lines with the music, it feels a little bit disparate, but at times it works really well. So it's a mixed bag a little bit for me. But overall, I think it shows a lot of talent and is really a cool little album that I think a lot of people would enjoy. So that is the first one, Scale the Summit Subjects. Second, we've got, this is a really interesting one, more along the lines of the typical symphonic prog or even the more pomp rock, art rock kind of genres from the 70s. This is Evership and their new album, The Uncrowned King. Now, Evership is a band that I've really been interested in. They've come out with a couple albums. I believe their first two albums were just Evership 1 and 2, if I remember right. And they had a lot of cool, interesting sounds on there. I feel like Evership are not really a pure progressive band. They're more kind of along the lines of like Styx or Queen, doing this kind of pomp rock of the 70s, this arena rock, art rock, if you will, but not really heavily really embracing the progressiveness totally. But I think that kind of plays to their favor. It gives them an interesting quality and gives them interesting place in the musical landscape, at least in my prog landscape. I think they occupy a space that's a little bit different than a lot of the other bands I like. But it's definitely a throwback style of a band. In fact, I almost feel like the production levels feel like they come out of the 70s, and a lot of the instruments they use and the sounds, I feel like this album could kind of almost be plucked from the 70s, which kind of gives it a little bit of a charm, but at the same time, sometimes I like more modern production and modern albums because I like the updated sound and the way that is sonically. But I respect what they're trying to do here, and I think it really gives an interesting flavor to the album that gives it a certain quality. This album is based on a concept. It's a concept album. This is Act 1. I believe there's an Act 2 planned, and it's based on a 1910 book of the same name by an American author, Harold Bell Wright. Kind of a similar style story to something like Pilgrim's Progress, which was covered by the Neil Morse Band on Similitude of Dream and Great Adventure. Christmas Carol, Prince and the Pauper, that kind of field of storytelling. This does that. So it takes you on a journey. It's a concept record that tells a story, and that's always up my lane. And it goes through a lot of kind of lengthy tracks that go through a lot of moods and varieties, have that very powerful vocals like Queen and Styx has that really cool quality to them, some harmonies and different things. I think the vocalist is really strong. There's almost a cinematic feel in certain parts of this because of the nature of the concept, but there's proggy bits, there's bits that sound almost like, modern-ish neo-prog sounds, but then it goes and delves back into this AOR style from the 70s like I've been mentioning. And so there's just a lot of cool moments. Voice of the Waves, the second track, is a shorter track with more ambient atmospheric sounds, almost a distorted vocal, almost a Pink Floyd vibe that adds a little bit of variety. Some of the bigger tracks, like The Pilgrimage that starts, is kind of gives you right in that wheelhouse of what you can expect. Crown Shine and All the Time is kind of standard neo-prog, but with some really cool guitars and keyboards, keeping the track interesting and varied. The Tower is a great track with some really pretty piano and harmony-style vocals. Really cool as it proceeds to rock more as it goes, and has this big kind of anthemic feeling towards the end with epic guitars. The Voice of the Evening Wind is more of a laid-back track with ethereal vocals by Poe Atkinson, who I suppose may be related to the main guy of this group, Shane Atkinson. And so it continues that way. Yet to Come, it might be, is the longest track of the album, and maybe the most varied and different. Acoustic guitar, big proggy opening, second section with power ballad kind of feel with powerful vocals, and then it closes out with Wait, which is more of a fun, bouncy kind of piano and stop and start vocal along lines of like a Queen, before it moves into more of a Pink Floydian type ballad. So you can kind of see what the influences are here. Styx, Queen, Kansas, those types of bands, maybe from the mid to late 70s period, is definitely a place you can look at for this. Definitely worth checking out if you like those style bands. There's a lot to like here. I've been liking it more as I delve more. The first time I heard it, I was a little bit lukewarm about it, but I think I've really felt it more as I've listened to it more and kind of came to terms with the production style and with the throwback sound. So I think it's really strong and worth checking out. So please check out this album by Evership. Very good. And then finally, what I've got on here, something totally off the wall different from those two, is a band called Beautiful Bedlam, and this is their self-titled album. So this is a band that was formed in Melbourne, Australia in 2017 from the ashes of another prog band, A Lonely Crowd, which I liked at that time. So that was a cool band back in those years. And so this is a band that is very quirky and different. It's a really cool album with a lot of variation in the style. I think it has kind of a jazzy vibe, very eclectic, has kind of this balance between these kind of jazzy, guitar lines that really come throughout the album. A lot of different time signatures and strange chords and melodies. And then there's kind of an alternative, harder edge to the music at times that comes through and provides a lot of variation to the music. I think that's kind of a hallmark of their sound, is this difference between these two styles, this kind of flowy, jazzy style to the guitars and to some of the singing styles, and then hitting you over the head with these kind of heavy riffs and these heavier sections, and even later in the album, almost these screaming, growling vocals that pop up every so often. So it's really interesting to hear the difference between these different sections, and each track kind of has its own unique flavor. So if you like something with a lot of variety and showcasing a lot of different genres and styles, I think this is a really great example of that. Really incredible music, and really highly recommended for fans of this. I fear that it gets a little too into that heavier lane towards the last few tracks, at least for my taste. Sometimes it even veers on this kind of aggressive, extreme metal style, but the first part of the album doesn't really go too far down that lane, so it's not too bad for me, who's not a fan of that style. I think it's still really varied and interesting throughout. Just really cool. A lot of different kind of guest vocalists throughout this as well, through certain tracks. I want to highlight a few tracks here. I really like the opener, Flaking Paint, with those cool jazzy guitar lines like I'm mentioning, and a cool heavy eclectic sound. I like Breather, which is the second track, which features female vocals. I think it's really great, kind of jazzy, more laid back, has this almost Gentle Giant-esque keyboard vibraphone kind of feel, and kind of towards the end with these like female background vocals on top of it. So it's a really cool track. I really appreciate Cocktail Crime Scene is a instrumental track with this eclectic jazzy vibe again, very proggy, and then the guitars get more heavy and distorted, switching back between these two different feels and continuing on with more eclectic sounds and styles throughout the mix. That's really the vibe that this album gives me, is this eclectic mixture. It's like this melting pot of all these different styles, and it's all put together in a crazy way, but it all sounds good to me in the mix. It kind of, that's the point of their name. The beautiful Bedlam name is this dichotomy, this almost oxymoron feel of the music is bedlam. It's crazy. There's a lot of different things going on, these jazzy guitars and these alternate time signatures and all of these wild effects, but there's a beauty to it when it's all put together and composed in the way that it is. There's just this beautiful nature to how the music comes across, and I think they cover both sides of that really well, and it kind of combines in this really unique, interesting way. It's a hard album to describe almost. It's something you kind of have to hear to understand, with all the intricate guitars and great keyboard additions. Open World is one of my favorite tracks, with some piano that's added to the soundscape. I think it's really great. There is a little bit of that kind of screaming towards the end, but only in small bursts. But overall, the sound of this track is a really great sound and has that progressive style that I'm looking for. I really love this album, even if it does veer heavy into that, heavier vibe towards the last few tracks. But I really like Sweet Oblivion as well. Has a lot of variety. The vocals aren't too overly aggressive yet, like they are in the final two tracks. And there's a little bit of acoustic guitar breaking things up. And it's really cool stuff. And so hopefully you'll go check this out. It's a really interesting, intricate album with a lot going on. And I really think it's strong. And the more I listen to it, the more things are uncovered, and the more the interest grows for me. So I really love it. I'm grateful for this album coming to me. It really inspired me and gave me a lot of eclectic things to listen to amongst a lot of my just typical fare that I listen to in the prog realm. So I'm grateful for it for that reason. So there you have it. 3 really great albums that I recommend checking out. And they're 3 very different albums, but they each kind of occupy their own lane in the prog sphere. So hopefully at least one of these appeals to you in some way. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you guys for your comments. I'm grateful for my subscribers and for all that you guys do for me. And please let me know your opinions of these albums. Are these ones that were on your radar? And how do you feel about them? So thank you guys again. And as always, keep enjoying the music. Thank you. Bye.